Hello, everyone. The long awaited conversation with Catherine Christensen is here. She is a Valour Law. And if you guys don't know or you haven't seen her, she's done a few shows now with a few of my friends. One of my favorite humans, Andy Stumpf on Cleared Hot, is where I actually found her, ironically and strangely enough, considering she's the province over. And so for the Americans listening, that's the state over from the state I currently live in, but with more communism. So I wanted to have her on the show today because I thought, well, first off, it's going to be more than one, but I wanted to start off the conversation because, as I had said to Andy Stumpf on our second episode, hey, there's this crazy thing going on above you. You know, you're in Montana and we're right above you and we're killing our citizens. You should know about it. And then he brought it up and said, are you sure about that? And I said, yeah, I'm super sure. Next thing you know, I jump on his show and there you are, having a conversation about some of these issues. And I could not have been more grateful to see that, because it's about damn time we start paying attention to these issues with our veterans, with our population, and truly looking at it from not only the human condition, but the legal side of things, looking at it from the medical side of things. And those are both areas that you are incredibly well versed as. Being a nurse for how many years were you a nurse?
About 22 years.
Perfect. And then we decided that we were going to take that and double down. You're kind of like the asshole who was in the Navy SEALs who went to be the astronaut afterwards. You said, I want to be a lawyer too. Okay.
Yeah.
So perfect. That's,
Yeah.
So this is how we got to where we are right now. But most importantly, you have become a good friend of mine and somebody that I can rely on. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think that shows your character, and it tells me why you are fighting the battles that you are fighting, because taking on the government in so many different ways is not really on everyone's favorite to-do list.
No, and it wasn't on my to-do list until October of 2021. Although I got to tell you, I was already clocking what was going on in the CAF. The problem I had was that I didn't have people that could afford to take on the government. And one or two plaintiffs can be written off as bad apples, disgruntled veterans. But when you've got 1,000 people bringing your phone off the hook in a week with stories of abuse of what their chain of command is doing, it's like, oh, that's kind of been handed to me on a silver platter, because it's hard to ignore that many voices.
It really is hard to ignore that many voices, but furthermore, it's really hard to take on all of those voices too. So that has its own mental health component and just time management schedule. So I can imagine once you started to get these phone calls, that took a toll, or had to at least get a little bit overwhelming at the beginning.
It did. It was, because I already had a really busy law practice. I wasn't sitting waiting for the phone to ring. I hadn't marketed my law practice in years at this point, but I'd always represented military and veterans. So that was how they found me, this initial group of people, because General Eyre had just issued his mandate for the vaccine.
Right.
And they were looking to save their careers. And other lawyers they approached, it was really interesting, because they were told, you've been given an order, follow it.
Correct.
They were told, don't come to my office, don't call me again, don't darken my door. Just because they said, they wanted to know what were my rights, etc.
Right.
And I was prepared I organized a Zoom meeting with them all so I could talk to them all at the same time.
Right.
And I was prepared to say to them, you can't sue the armed forces. They're pretty protected. But then they started sending me their stories. And one more heartbreaking story after another. It was like, I got to find a way to do something for these people. If they're willing to take me on, I'm willing to take them on.
Well, can you explain to me then what that meant when you said I was going to advise them you can't sue the CAF? Other than people's personal stories, can you break that down a little bit as to why that would have been the mindset prior to hearing the stories?
So when I took military law in law school, it was taught by two JAG officers. One was from the Cold War era. The other was an Afghanistan era JAG. And they basically said, you can't sue the armed forces. They're basically legally untouchable. That never sat well with me, because I thought everybody's touchable. If we have rule of law in our country, everybody's touchable. And then my practice went on, I was beginning to, some days, Kelsey, I think I should have crimson clearance, because I talked to so many people that no one person is revealing anything, but I've talked to so many, all the information has come into one place that I'm smart enough, I'll say, to put pieces together.
Hmm.
And so as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, there's got to be a way to show the chain of command that they are actually have to obey the rule of law. They're not
Right.
above the law in Canada just because they're military. And in fact, I find a military that says the law doesn't apply to the forces is scary.
Hmm. Well, there's a couple of examples of that outside of your situation that I think I wonder if you had maybe have heard of any of these. I don't think they end up um, following up in a lawsuit, but it's just it's a good indicator of the mindset of the staff in the CAF. And it was I think it was last year. There was, we hear a lot about the assaults in the military on men on women assaults, but it's very rare that we would ever hear about a female doing something untoward toward a subordinate. But last year there was actually in Gagetown, we had a situation where a female officer used her rank and her right to basically punish this young man. And like it was not things like just change parade. She would keep him out in like just, well, think about, if for people don't know, New Gagetown, New Brunswick gets horrifically cold in the winter. You get frostbite just as cold as you would in Alberta. It is not a place where you can have exposed skin for long periods of time. But she would have this guy stand outside in his PT gear in the winter and just berated this young man into the ground, to the point where his mental health took such a significant turn. And over people were saying, this is unacceptable, this is too far, you can't do that. If we did this to a female, this would be over. And she just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. I don't remember what ended up being the result, but it was quite big. It was all over social media for a little bit, because we had not seen a female abusing her ranks like that before. And I think we know it happens. And I think it happens because hurt people. And I'm not saying that's ever a scapegoat or an excuse, but that is the reality in our system, especially in the Canadian and the American military. And I'll move on from this in a second, but I just had Rebecca, I'm going to say her last name wrong, but it's Mach Machakowski. She's, anyway, long and short, she's the famous female medic on the front lines of Ukraine right now. I had her on the show yesterday while she's in Ukraine, taking rounds every 6 minutes from the Russians. And very choppy, wild interview. But what was very fascinating to me was she's an American nurse who has been over there for 2 years. And her sibling, like sister, twin, works in the United States military. And they both stated very emphatically that in no chance would they ever serve alongside an American, Canadian, or British unit. British, I stand different on that, but because of assault, because there was a constant fear of assault everywhere you went, everywhere you looked. And I said, how is that for you on the front lines there? She said, if a man looks at me the wrong way, a Ukrainian soldier will come up to me and say, does he need to disappear?
Mhm.
So there is a way that we deal with things, and it feels like the CAF in itself is one of those systems that not only acts like, walks like, talks like, is in some levels untouchable, because my ex-major sexually assaulted women 7 times and was promoted continuously and never criminally charged. And we have these cases over and over and over again, like was it Captain X or so and so X,
Mm.
that was all over. Nobody will ever say his name, but he was a problem and still a problem. So what I find interesting is that you were willing to take on a system that we have known now for an extended period of time will not take accountability while preaching accountability. Kind of sounds like some other Navy SEALs I know. So I want to understand. I want to understand how you thought outside of, being a mother and a woman, and had that, compassion and empathetic, I need to do something. I want to understand how you really could wrap your brain around, I'm going to go after the largest national defense arm of this country.
Well, I'm not afraid to take on a giant.
No
Hugging an
shit,
elephant one piece at a time.
I
Uh,
guess.
Basically, my strategy was to come at it in a way that they didn't know we were coming.
Okay.
That protected my lawsuit. It protected my clients. It protected me and my team, because for 2 years we very quietly pulled ATIPs, and I
Mm.
had not one of them came out of my office, not one.
Ah.
And they came, and we asked for the same information with different people asking for it.
And they never flagged this.
They never flagged it until I filed the lawsuit just before.
Okay.
And
So 2
so,
years of this
so
behavior.
2 years of this, and we've continued. So now you're seeing in the news about the information commissioner is, in fact, here in a few weeks, is taking them to court because they're trying to hide documents now. They
Mm.
know what it is. The other part of it is they gave different redactions on the same documents to different people. So we've been able to piece together the actual document because we've got all the unredacted versions of it. Or because they didn't realize what the document would end up being used for, where they'd send it
Right.
unredacted. And then they'd send me a threatening letter saying, you can't use this, it has to be redacted. And I'm like, too late.
You already sent it to us, but also if you could take one, and this is redacted and this is redacted, you can just piece it together and go, this is
Exactly.
what the whole page says.
Yeah.
Oh, who's getting fired for this?
Well, uh, the truth of it is that I'm more dangerous without being a lawyer.
Right.
Which is why, I mean, because I'll be honest with you, as soon as I started down this road, I was watching Jordan Peterson go through what he was
Hmm.
going through with his professional body, and I was just waiting for the Law Society to show up
Do
to
you think
try
that's
and.
still a problem?
Yeah, I think that's always hanging over my head. But I, my, how do I put it? My faith in that is what happened to Ezra Levant, who went to the same law
Okay.
school as I did, by the way,
Okay.
was a lawyer with the Law Society of Alberta. They didn't like how he was doing things, what he was saying, and he showed up at one of their hearings and said, "Well, fine, then I resign. I'm I'm not a lawyer anymore." And then they
Right.
lost all control of him
Right.
because as long as I hold a license, there's certain things that I am required to do or obligated to do.
Right.
But they take away my license, I've got a million pages of evidence of all
Right.
kinds of wrongdoing now.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I like that you touched on that, because there's also a few doctors that are heads of research who have treated veterans for over 40 years, who are like the most respected in this country for veterans affairs, like post-traumatic stress treatment, traumatic brain injury, you name it. And we've had a similar conversation off the record about this, saying, pull my license. Because if you pull my license, I'll burn you to the ground.
Hmm.
Because they don't really want you talking.
No,
They really don't. Because
no,
if
they
they
really don't.
do, you could break the system in half
Yeah,
legitimately, not a
yeah,
threat, legitimate documentation.
legitimate. And I honestly, with how corrupt the Canadian Armed Forces is,
Right.
I wouldn't hold back to do it.
Right.
To be honest, the system is that system is so broken, as many things are in Canada,
Right.
that honestly, it needs to go to the ground and be rebuilt.
Is that a unrealistic uh, want or need for this country? Because to say that the National Defense Center, like the arm that is supposed to presumably protect this country, which we know it doesn't, because it never really acts within it unless it's over COVID and on our own civilians, but
Mm.
just allegedly, that in itself, I mean, we already, and we're going to get into a little bit of the numbers here down the throughout the episode, but just off the top, I mean, last time I checked, we had less than 15,000 actual DAG green deployable soldiers. We
Hmm.
do not have a fighting force right now. And if we do, the majority, and for those that have been in all through GWAT and are listening, I'm not speaking to you or about you. I'm talking about the new ones that have come in that accept the blue hair, no blouse, shitty standards, 5 push-ups or I cry situation. Those people are not war fighters.
No, no. And the truth is that we are rotating people through Latvia right now so hard
Yes.
that the people we do have are burning out.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
they're going for 7 months, 9 months, some of them a year. They've even shortened some deployments to 4 months so they can rotate them more.
The thing that I want to understand is we were already struggling with the rotational amount in Afghanistan from what was it, 7 to 13 roughly. And those were 6 months. And then SF was what, a few months off, few months on, few months off, few months off. So we don't quite have the same number one, numbers as the United States military. We also we're missing another branch. They have the Marines. They're a whole other ball game on their own, but we don't rotate. They were rotating 9, 12, 18 months. So is it better to rotate longer, you think, or rotate shorter and burn them out and destroy the family slowly over time?
It's tough to say, because having done so much family law with military families,
Yeah.
the destruction was there. The effects of the Afghanistan deployments are still being felt now,
Oh,
all these
yes.
years later. Marriages are being affected,
Yeah.
kids are being affected. So, but at the same time, if you aren't, dad comes home for a few weeks and then he's gone again, is probably harder than dad's gone and then he comes back and has a block of time and then
Yes.
goes again.
That's kind of my
So,
perspective on it, right? That
mhm,
in and out feels more difficult than routine schedule behavior.
yeah.
It feels like dropping a grenade and then leaving as the destruction has to kind of be put back together. That's
Right. And
personal.
the other side of it, of course, is that mom or dad still has to adjust to civilian life in that short time they're home. So
Right.
you add in all the expectations of the family on top of what they're already processing. It's just a recipe of disaster for me.
And that's the other thing too. And I try to get others that listen, because this show is predominantly listened to everywhere outside of Canada. So I try to get people to understand that when you look at the population size of Canada, it can fit into California. All of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. Now, take an entire fighting force within that nation and only take 15,000 of those people, and now put the burden of the entire defense system onto them. And the majority of those are very young individuals. Now rotate them and ask them to pay for their own plane tickets and their own helmet costs to go to Latvia,
Or
as
their
if,
food.
or their food, and then
Yeah.
cut their paycheck a quarter at like every other year, just because you want to send it to either Ukraine or, pay for security at Taylor Swift. So it's
Mhm.
just, we don't actually care about our military. It feels
Yeah.
like they want them to burn out and actually just cease to exist.
Well, the Liberals have a reputation for destroying the military, the decade of darkness in the 90s, but what's happening now puts that was nothing compared to what they're doing now, in my
So
opinion.
let's talk about what they're doing now. So
Mhm.
you came into this, you've been obviously practicing law, you were a nurse. We're going to get into the maid conversation here in a little bit, because that's what I was so thrilled about, was not only knowing how educated and obviously intelligent you were around law, but then when you said to me, oh, also, I was a nurse and these are the types of behaviors we would do. It's like, holy shit, you're kind of like two birds here. So I like I said, we're going to do multiple of these conversations, but let's start off with, let's just go right to the most immediate, most impactful that we've seen in the past little bit. 2021, we all started getting crazy ass phone calls and we started getting weird behavior. We started seeing increasingly tyrannistic conversations happening to the, not only the staff members, but then all the way down to the subordinates, saying things like, if you don't get vaccinated, you're getting kicked out of the military. If you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. If you do this, you're going to have a dishonorable discharge. And then even after all of that, when you called for help, they were offering you assisted suicide. So
Mhm.
let's start at the top. How did the first phone call come in for you? Do you remember what that was when you started all of this tirade toward you?
Well, it was really interesting because right about the same time, I had been informed that I had a trial coming up in October of 21. And I'd been informed that I wasn't going to be allowed to step in the courtroom to represent my client unless I was vaccinated with 2 doses. My client doesn't have time to find another lawyer for a trial at that point.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Livin'. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Livin'. Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression, and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodlivin.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodlivin.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today. And brought to you by Culture. You guys know I am so dedicated to my mental health and my physical resilience. I'm always on the lookout for the next tool that makes the biggest difference. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you my new partnership with Culture. They are Canada's #1 cold plunge, and they are trusted by over 40,000 people across North America. The benefits are incredible, whether it's better sleep, reduced stress, faster recovery, or just more energy at the end of the day. And with Culture's unmatched quality and world-class customer care, this is the brand that I trust, not only for me, but my family. So if you're ready to challenge yourself, to change your life, improve your life, then go over to culture.com and use the code Kelsey at checkout. It's going to give you $250 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? Go on over, culture.com. Use the code Kelsey. Let's go. Yeah.
And so I'm facing that same, because I would be disbarred for not showing up for a trial that we'd been preparing for a year.
Right.
And leaving a client on their own. So I'm grappling with this because I was not vaccinated at that point. And I get the phone call about the mandate, and it was panic. It was a small group of people, about 5 people, who had been to calling other law firms. They'd even gone in person and met with a lawyer in Ontario.
Oh, wow.
And they were just getting shut down. And then they kind of Googled military lawyers, and I popped up because of my work. So they reached out to me, and I was like, oof, anything, I won't get in a courtroom with a COVID case in Canada. That was my thought. But then I'd been struggling because in law school, I had independent legal research on informed consent because of my nursing background.
That's right.
I knew informed consent as a nurse. Had a reputation for ticking off surgeons.
No, not you.
Who I'd make come out of the OR and explain what they were going to do for the patient, because I'd say to the patient, "You understand what's going to happen?" And they'd go, "No." And I go, "Whoa, you're not going to the OR till you know what's going to happen." So I wrote a paper, and I'd used the opioid scandal as, did people have informed consent before they were handed these pills? Because I was seeing women come in for a C-section being given opioids and coming back 2 years later completely addicted with their next baby. So that was bugging me. So that I did that paper. The judge the law professor who did that paper with me ended up on the Supreme Court.
Okay.
That's another story, though, because they conveniently have removed him from the Supreme Court. And I know he was waiting for a COVID case to hit the Supreme Court, because I know what his take is on informed consent.
Right. Yeah. And that would have been a problematic situation for that court. That would have
been a problem. So I'm already watching what's going on. I'm already thinking, wait a minute, there's no informed consent when you force people into sick parades or parades of any kind to force you. They're not telling them everything. And you can't coerce anyone into a medical treatment.
Can't you?
Yeah, I didn't think so until I just got a judgment here not long ago. The court is saying the CAB could do anything they want.
Can they? So they can rape their people too, right? Because it's informed consent.
Yeah, according to this, I actually have a document signed by Admiral Topshee, who's currently been promoted to the head of our Navy, that says, and I'm going to quote him, "There is no bodily autonomy in the Canadian Armed Forces."
Oh.
And the woman whose paperwork he wrote that on is a rape victim.
What?
So when she asked for an accommodation, that was the response. That was part of his response
Was you don't
with
have
his signature on it. So you can't be raped in the Canadian Armed Forces because, according to one of our top admirals, there's no bodily autonomy. If you have no bodily autonomy, anything can be done to you.
So what does that signal to every woman that has been raped over and over and over by their superiors?
The men who've been raped.
Oh, and the amount of men who
Mhm.
will call me for coaching and support because they do not think they can work with somebody else who's a male and say, I got raped by one of my guys.
Yeah. Or raped by women. The female officers are, wow. Some of the stories that I hear.
I don't know if and maybe I'm wrong on this, and maybe you can tell me because you're in this a lot more than I am. Do we just not talk about the fact that women can rape men anymore? Like they think that because there's like, well, no, the man has to get an erection. Like, no, it's you can make biological things happen in order for rape to ensue.
Mhm.
And it still is rape is rape is rape.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have consent, you've raped someone. And it doesn't matter what sex you are.
Right.
If you did not get consent or you coerce someone, you force them to do something, or they're going to pay for it.
Which is often the conversation.
Yeah. And some of the worst abuses during the COVID mandate era in the Canadian Armed Forces were female commanding officers.
Oh, yeah. Positions of power.
They were most brutal. Yeah.
Women are crazy. I love women.
They wanted revenge for you didn't follow my order and you will pay.
Yeah. And not only will you pay, but I'll remember every single male that ever said this to me, did this to me. And when I get to the top, I am going to bleed on everyone below me because I can. And no one will touch me because I will scream sexual assault, or I will scream that it is a blatant violation because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, these women.
And one of the big things I hear from women veterans is how disgruntled they are by some of the DEI stuff, because they said they spent years being acknowledged for their skill set, and now when a woman gets into a position of command, it's like, well, did she earn that, or is she getting it because she's a woman?
Well, look at the new head of the CDS. Look at the new CDS. We discussed this. And for those who are not sure who I'm discussing, you can do yourself a favor. Go to YouTube, type in the words Forsaken Warriors, and look under Aaron Gunn's new documentary. We discussed DEI. I discussed DEI with Jordan Peterson. I discussed it with Aaron Gunn as well. And other females in that documentary have also discussed the CDS and how she is 150% a DEI hire. And that is strictly because, and 100% provable, this is not defamation, she abandoned Canadian troops while they were under fire and got caught trying to flee. And anybody who says that did not happen clearly has not spoken to the men she abandoned. But if another guy did that, they would be court-martialed and put in prison for treason. But we just promoted her to run the Canadian defense.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about women in combat and under fire. She hid under her desk and then ran for the helicopter when it got there, leaving her troops behind. And it was an American general that got her ass off that helicopter and said, you don't go first.
That is a weak, weak human. And that is the saddest part, is because there are women that I served with that are still serving right now, that are some of the most, they terrified me. I would go into war again with them over some of these men I had to serve with all day long, because they will do crazy, crazy things to protect people. Whereas this CDS, she makes all of us, and she puts a stain on the Canadian Forces as who she is. She is one of those people who single-handedly makes the rest of us look like shit.
Yeah, diversity is our superpower.
Yeah, so is communism for the Chinese, but here we are anyway.
Here we are, because I'm a big fan of meritocracy. I don't care about all the social stuff. I don't care we're male or female. Can you do the job?
That's it.
You know, if I'm taken hostage, the team that comes in to get me, if I'm wounded and they got to carry me out of there, that's the team I want coming to get me.
Right.
I don't care if the person manning the helicopter is male or female, but I
No.
know that a 5 foot, 105 pound woman is not going to be able to get me out of a
Listen to
bad
me, Miss Thang.
situation.
Listen to me, Miss Thang. That is me, and I would,
I
because
know.
I am capable. But I would challenge how many females who have the background I have in order to do that. And that was only because of the background I had prior to service. It had nothing to do with what I learned in service. So
Yeah. And to
it's
be fair,
different.
there's men that couldn't do it as well.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
you know, special forces. If a woman wants to be in special forces, as long as she can meet the same
You can do
standard as
it.
everybody else, all the power to her. Go for it.
But we know that's not true. We know that in America, they've actually lowered the bar. And we know that they've lowered the bar in Canada as they've lowered the bar anywhere else because they wanted to bring females forward. And this was the conversation that you become now a liability. You are no longer an asset. And I do believe that there should be things like, I do agree with the way the IDF does this. They have female special operations units that are designed to be specific. You know, before, when I served, we didn't have a name for the job I did. They would just call us a female searcher. And then 15, 16 kicked off in America, and they started calling them, what are they? Cultural attaches. It's like CSTs, cultural support teams. And that is a whole other, you have to have been one of those to be called that. But the people like us who paved that way, we just get called the woman that got attached to the unit. So
Right.
it's very different now where they're trying to integrate. But the thing I see about integration is, and this is the conversation I had with Mike Ritland, where he said, I don't think women should be doing that job. And I said, well, if we want to keep fighting fair with following the rules, where men cannot touch a woman with a burqa, where men, if we really want to say we're doing it right, even though our enemies don't, then we have to have women in those jobs. And men act different when women are around. Men respond different when women are around. And I'm not saying that the assault crisis is because a woman's around. I think the responsibility needs to be on the man for the majority of that, as long as the woman's not leading the charge on that and then screaming rape, because we do know that happens and people don't want to say that, but that is the truth. It does happen. But it also happens with other men in the units raping other men outside the wire. So this isn't about a woman thing. It's if we want to follow the Geneva Convention, we want to follow the rule of law, women have to be in those positions. If they can do the job, they should be able to do it. But lowering the bar is a risk that will get more people killed than it will actually help the mission set.
Yes, absolutely agree. I mean, the Canadian Armed Forces has removed the aptitude test.
Excuse me?
In recruiting. Yeah. Yeah, that happened not long ago where they've taken it away.
I saw the military come to the Grey Cup, which, by the way, they brought Prince Harry in for 3.5 minutes. I can only imagine the hundreds of thousands of dollars that got wasted on that security to have him there. And I still don't understand what he was there for. I've called friends, but why was he there? I don't get it. But I think it was to promote Invictus anyway, but that's a whole other thing. So we were at the Grey Cup and everyone walks out. And I was disgusted with what I witnessed, but that's because people will say, well, you're just an old school soldier. I'm not. I was out in 11. Relax. The dress code, the sloppiness, the inability to march together, the inability to put their hair up properly, their inability to not have jewelry and nail color and hair dye and weird things that when you look at that military, it looks to me like a third world nation military that took people off the street and said, here's your uniform. You're in the military now.
Right. Yeah.
It's offensive as hell.
It is. Well, and let's be honest, dress and deportment wasn't just to make the military look sharp. There was a reason behind it.
Right.
And that's been lost. I mean, I live in a city that's right on the doorstep of CFB Edmonton.
That's right.
And what I see in the community is not what I used to see in the community even 5 years ago.
It's not respected either because of it. And people like us look at it and go, because there are people that will still hold the standard that we're in when we were in my ex-sergeant, who's an officer who's actually retiring this year, is one of the reasons he's retiring is he could not take the system anymore. Over 27 years of service.
Yeah.
And he said, I could not. We had situations when I went out to New Brunswick to do my last round, and there was one female I respected that was incredibly high up. I won't say her name or her rank, it'll give it away. But she was instructed she was going to be one of the only females that wrote on my book. And she was instructed if she ever wanted to become the track that she's on to be general, she cannot write her name in my book.
Yeah.
That's insanity.
Yeah. That's a military that's more political than anything
Exactly.
else. Yeah.
So let's dive into this. So you got the phone calls, you got 5 people, they're panicking. You go, how do I work this? How do I look for other people? Did they just start coming to you?
They started coming to me. I didn't, it was word of mouth. It just, as soon as I said, I'm willing to have a meeting with you and figure out what can and can't happen.
Yeah.
And I'd set up the Zoom meeting. It just, the gossip channels,
Yeah.
it just exploded. And before I knew it, there were almost 1,000 people were asking questions. I had to keep upgrading my Zoom to get everybody in. And so then I'm hearing these stories, and they're infuriating me, to be honest. I was just getting more furious every time at what was happening, that they were being told, you have no rights in the military. You have no charter rights. And I'm thinking, yes, you do. I don't recall seeing anything in the oath or in the paperwork that says I give up all my rights as a Canadian citizen to wear the uniform. So I'm getting more. Then I'm thinking, I can't bring a COVID case. They won't even let me in the courtroom if I do that. So then I got thinking, wait a minute, what else is there? And by the time I met with them 2 to 3 weeks later, I said, if you're willing to try, and I'm willing to try, we can go after them for abuse of power. There is a tort of public misfeasance. I said, it's a rare thing in Canada. It doesn't happen very often, but if you're interested, we can go after them for it. They wanted me to try an injunction. Injunctions are incredibly hard to get. We did try, but I'll be honest with you, my purpose of doing the injunction was I wanted to see what the Crown brought to the table.
Okay, so it opened up the books, basically.
Yeah. What are they going to fight back on with what we're saying? And it did well. I knew during the injunction hearing, when the Crown lawyers were doing this to the screen, that I was getting under their nerve. That
we're hitting a button, doesn't it? So we apply pressure here.
Yeah,
perfect.
Let's just keep going there. So then we got the decision on the injunction. We did not get it, and they said, "Well, you have to use the grievance system." And the grievance, that's a whole other ballgame. But so I had another call with my clients afterwards, and I said, okay, they want us to use a grievance system. Break it. And they're like, what? I said, break it. I said, every single little thing from now until you're out.
Yeah.
Complain about it. And don't put it in a big bunch. Every single little thing. We came up with almost 10,000 grievances in 6 months.
Oh my God.
Whoosh.
You broke it all right.
Yeah, and then in the background, we're pulling all these ATIPs.
Right.
And
so they're distracted over here.
Yeah, and so then they don't have enough clerks to do ATIPs.
No.
And they would try to say, oh, well, there's nothing. And then I would have them write back and say, no, these emails exist because I wrote some of them. And they, It was almost like a Mark Norman situation again, right?
Yes.
Where he was like, no, I know there's emails because I was writing them. Where's my email record? The whistleblower from the Mark Norman trial also got in touch with me when word got out what we were doing.
Good.
And said, here's what you're looking for. So, it just, and from there, we and I said, okay, OPSEC, we're going dark, we're going quiet.
Yeah.
Nobody talked to anybody, nobody post anything on social media. The only thing that gets out is me talking. And that wasn't an ego thing. That was to control the information.
No, it's
as well.
necessary.
Yeah. And the brilliant thing about having military clients, they follow orders
Yes,
really
they
well.
will.
And so that's what we did. And we stayed dark and quiet. And yeah. And we were meanwhile, we were just gathering.
So as you're
I had
gathering.
people going into meetings with their COs recording them. I've got COs on tape because in Canada you can do that as long as one party knows it's being recorded. As long as it's not in a secure area, I got all kinds
Oh,
of I got all kinds of tape.
are you worried about your life?
Uh, well, the people have expressed concern for that. I
I'm
have,
expressing concern for
yeah,
it.
but I have a battalion of people with very special skills
Yeah.
to look after me. So I have a lot of JTF2 clients.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do, because I know some of them.
Yeah,
But you have the best ones too. You
I
don't just
do.
have like you don't just have like the I'm kind of JTF2. You have like I'm the JTF2. Yes. Which
When
is
you get
true.
this kind of coin,
Yes. That's the coin you want, Miss Thing. This is the truth.
so
Oh,
yeah, and I got a whole battalion behind me
yeah.
with all different skills. I have clients that have been intelligence. They're the ones that told me what they're watching and what they're looking for and how they're doing it because they were doing it.
Right. Exactly. So why
So
wouldn't they?
yeah. So according to Air, I'm a Russian spy. So
Oh, I knew it with your accent.
I
It gave
know.
it off.
My call sign is Empress
Oh, perfect.
because with the Third Cavalry in Texas, I made the mistake of saying my name, I said it's Catherine, like Catherine the Great.
Oh no.
So Empress.
This is what
But
happens for you.
so when Air came out with the whole anybody that opposes the military is a Russian asset. We had a great time in my chat with my clients about that one because it's like, oh, that's
I
why I
guess
have that call sign.
I knew it. A lot of us are just I've always been struggling with my identity. You've just given it to me. I'm Russian.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
knew it. It all makes so much sense now. It's just like everything just fell into place right there. I guess that's what happens when anybody opposes anything, as we've seen over the past 6 years. You must just be Russian.
Yeah.
That's
Well, they
it.
can't say Chinese because they don't want to open that door.
Oh, because you were owned by them. That's
Yeah,
offensive to our owners.
that's right.
Yeah, we can't
Well,
say that.
it's interesting because in the hearing in September, the Crown lawyer stood up and called me a conspiracy theorist in the courtroom.
It's only delusional until it's true.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not saying anything that's not being revealed as truth right now. So
Well, this is the one thing too I want to explain for those that are listening, because a lot of people will listen to this episode or maybe other episodes and other ones I have coming out on Trig and stuff and go, "Holy shit, I don't think you can talk about people like that. Isn't that defamation?" And it's no, actually, as long as you can prove what you've said, none of it is defamation.
yeah,
You don't have to like it. It may make you uncomfortable. It may make you feel all types of things. But it's not defamation. It's the truth, and it just came out publicly, and you didn't like it.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
But the absolute defense to defamation is the truth.
Right. And even if it's public, it makes it that much more hilarious because you can go, well, the National Post printed this. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Like what? Like
Exactly.
their own propaganda arm printed this. What are you saying? So I want to understand for you, because having the background you have doing all of these things, you understand that you've pushed the buttons and that you're in there guaranteed. They sent out this report, and I wonder if you've seen it. It came out with ATIP, but basically it was calling anybody who was against, if they were in the military, they were a veteran, terrorist extremists. We were extremists. So all of us have been labeled as extremists, which means we're on some form of watch list. We have to
Right.
be. Like, there's no reason why you and I and, like, I don't know, Dallas wouldn't be on some form of watch list, right? Because cool. So when people say to me, you're a terrorist, I say it because it's the truth. The fact of the matter is, in these ATIP reports, they deemed any of us who did not want to go with the status quo as domestic terrorists to the country.
Yeah.
How are they allowed to do that, though?
They're skirting it under the national security envelope is how I think they're trying to say it.
Mm.
Also, the other fact is they haven't been challenged on it and challenged in a way that they could go before a judge that wouldn't agree with them. So
So
that
you're saying the
that kind of
judges are the problem,
that kind of
huh?
opens the door to what's wrong with our legal system, because we don't have a justice system, we have a legal system.
Explain the difference, please.
So people go into a courtroom thinking they're going to get justice. Something's going to make them whole again.
Right.
You're never going to find that in a courtroom in Canada.
Why?
Mainly because a lot of our justices are liberal and will toe the line. It is a hard thing to get a justice in Canada to contravene the law and say, no, I don't agree with the law. The law is wrong. And that's what our system is supposed to be for. The judicial branch is supposed to challenge laws and force Parliament to change laws that they deem to be unconstitutional, unreasonable, etc. That's what our court system is supposed to do. But instead, people walk into it, and it's a legal system. It's full of foreign language. It's full of a whole bunch of process. And even if you win at the end of the day, you actually don't win. You've spent a fortune. You've been gone through the grinder.
Yeah.
And maybe you can get a little bit of money out of it. And in Canada, we don't have the big lawsuits where there's millions and millions of dollars per person on the line. I mean, even Veterans Affairs has put a price on a life.
Yes, they have. I found out.
It's 400 and something thousand now, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, it's just under $500,000, and then they will cap it even if you have a claim. I just did my last claim. I just finally won after 2 years. Finally got them to admit traumatic brain injury due to specific use of an M777 for the first time. Mm-hmm. So if you have any of your people who are suing for that, we now have precedent.
Nice.
Yes, it's very exciting.
Yeah,
they do that.
And our courts agree with that number. Veterans Affairs didn't come up with that number on their own. That's what the courts have said. Well, that's about how much it's worth.
$500,000 for a human life.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. But life insurance, you can put tens of millions.
Right.
But the Canadian Armed Forces, the people that are supposed to be the most trained, most educated in their job, the deadly war fighters, and they put how much? I mean, they have to put at least, I would think at least a couple $100,000 into training a human to march, kit, posting.
That's maybe a private in infantry, not very far in.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like you talk about, say somebody, like I use him as the example because we're friends and he knows I whore his name out. But Dallas, like if you take Dallas, for example, the guy who's part of the world's longest military history kill shot, the amount of money that would have gone into training that human, him and his brother-in-law and everyone else that's around us, millions of dollars into one person.
So just from the COVID mandate, the losses of people from the COVID mandate.
Yes.
We sat down and calculated it.
Oh, please tell me.
We're looking at anywhere from $5 to $10 billion in lost training.
Oh my God.
And that's just from the COVID mandate. That's just from it.
With a B?
With a B. Because we've lost JTF2 people, we've lost
pilots.
CSOR, we've lost, it wiped out across the board.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was huge. The Canadian public has no idea how much that mandate cost the Canadian taxpayer.
Wow.
If you want to just talk dollars and cents.
Let's talk dollars for a second, because that will wrap around people's brains a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's why we did it, because I said, how much have we actually lost in money, taxpayer dollars? And we sat down and anywhere from $5 to $10 billion.
When we were complaining about 300 million going over to Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another one of the $1 billion losses for the federal Liberals again.
Do you think that I know the answer to this. Do you think that was intentional?
Yeah.
Cripple the service, cut its knees out?
Because the people they lost are the people with the actual experience and expertise that we need. We could conscript
Yeah.
millions of people, hundreds of thousands of young men and women tomorrow.
Right.
We don't have anyone to train them.
With real experience.
Because they wiped out the master corporals, the sergeants, the warrants, the captains who had the actual hands-on in real world experience.
Right.
That's who trains new recruits. It's not the generals in Ottawa that come out to train new recruits.
No.
It's these people that were these NCOs and these, career captains for life. They're the ones that we're training.
It's
new recruits.
You're
new
not wrong.
officers, right?
Because my staff who trained, and I'm just doing this contextually for others. So my staff who trained me in basic training were from Valcartier. Ironically, I ended up going there, so the French never stopped sticking to me. The sergeants that I had, though, were PTSD ridden, and I'm not exaggerating. You said something wrong, and they would whip chairs at the walls and put you in push-up position for an hour because they couldn't control their own selves because they had just done rotational deployments, and it was the first time that they had seen deployment or anything like that. And those are the ones that come back to train us. And this is why when I deployed, with the 1 year of training I had before I went outside the wire, I was able to hold it together because these staff knew how to shoot and how to move in real time. And they really understood that you weren't just looking for suicide bombers. You were looking for the cigarette pack with 2 pieces of tinfoil with the wire attached to it and the pile of garbage you were going to go kick that you knew you shouldn't kick, even though you kind of wanted to, because instinctually you just want to kick it. You don't kick it. You never kick it because you know what happens when you kick it. And then they would show you a personal video from their phone that they took and said, this is why you don't kick it.
Yeah.
And then they would call you fuck stick or something in French. So you need people with real world experience. My sergeant who was infantry before, you need the guy who goes, you're going to go clear the house. And I know this isn't your job, but you need to know how to do it because you'll get shot in the back if you don't know how. We're going to do extra. Right. So who's going to train the next snipers? It's not going to be Dallas and his brother-in-law. Who's going to train these next people on how to properly move into situations when there's an ambush, or Chinook pilots who have crashed before and survived, like my friend Adam? Like, who's going to train these people?
Good question. So
I don't think anybody.
We don't have them. We don't have the people. Well, you said at the Grey Cup, they didn't even know how to march.
God.
the video that went viral from Remembrance Day from here in Edmonton.
Was that Edmonton?
That was Edmonton. That was at West Edmonton Mall.
So much worse if it's from Edmonton because that is a combat arms area.
Yeah. Yeah.
That marching was
well, when my son was a cadet, they marched better than that.
In basic training, our first week when we were still in civilian clothing, we marched better than that. And you looked at the ranks on the shoulders of those people, and you looked at, and I'm going to address something, and I know this makes people uncomfortable, and people say, Kelsey, you're judging, but I'm judging because of service. I'm not judging from the human. I'm judging if you are overweight and unhealthy, you are a liability. It's the same with cops when they are overweight and unhealthy. If you cannot run, you cannot move, you cannot carry, you cannot shoot, you're a liability to your partner. And when you saw those people marching and the ranks on their shoulders, and the fact that they were okay with their boots looking the way they looked, marching the way they marched, and doing that openly in public, if I were them, I would have hidden in the bathroom because that shit was so damn embarrassing to anybody whose faces were caught on that camera.
And I mean, what about their CO? What about their RSM? That's example. There's your work on display, going viral.
It's only going to get worse.
That's good enough for you. It's just, I got COs physically torturing their troops, and then meanwhile they've got other COs that can't even care enough to make sure that their people know how to properly parade. And we know that properly parading is part of that unit cohesion, that pride in what you're doing, and
yes,
being aware of what's going on around you. I mean,
Yeah, it's not just marching. I'm not
it's
just picking
being
out
pretty.
No, I'm not picking it out to be this person who is picking apart, trying to demean other humans. I'm picking it apart because, like you said, for those that don't understand the military and why we march in sync and why we move in the way we move, it does absolutely nothing to do with the marching. It has everything to do with the mindset, situational awareness, understanding where you are, how you move, how they move, and knowing that if you go to run, you don't need to look to the left and to the right. Everyone knows where they go. That's why hand signals are used and not your voice when you're in the woods or where you're other tracking or you're doing these things. You need to be able to know that I'm going to look forward at this and I'm going to make a hand signal and I don't even have to check. I know you're watching. And there's so much more to it. And so it's not about the failure of the individual. It's about the failure of the staff. It's about the failure of the shit rolling downhill. And when you have a commander in chief like Justin Trudeau, because I refuse to call him by whatever he's been voted into because he's not a leader at all, he's the guy, you know who he reminds me of? He's the guy that I had at DP1 in Gagetown who was on sick pat all the time. But when he finally did come back, he ND'd a 105 live howitzer with foo in front of us and then still got to deploy. He's that guy.
Right. Yeah.
But he's just running the country. Sorry.
Yeah. Heaven help us.
Sorry. He's the proxy for the Chinese who's running the country. That's insane to me. It blows my mind. So let's go a little further into what has happened recently. You've taken on how many clients to end up going into this lawsuit?
So for the first one, it was 330 that were actually able to meet the deadlines to get me what I needed and sign and agreed to sign on. Once word got out about that one, I was approached by more people, but real tight timeline because we're coming up against limitations because we had delayed filing for a reason. And so it ended up being 128. So there's 458 members and veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces who were willing to put their name on a public document and say the forces are rotten in the core. There's a lot of abuse in the ranks, and we want it to stop.
Right.
So, 458 people put their names out there, and we're willing to step up.
And for those that don't understand really what that means and why she repeated it twice is because now it puts a target on their back for their pensions, for their treatments, for their families, and for their entire community that doesn't necessarily agree with them.
Right. Yeah. And that they're accepted isolation, even the veterans. And all these people had served really fantastic careers. There's people there with racks of, like a really big rack of medals from stuff they have done under the flag of Canada. And as you know, Kelsey, in Canada, medals don't come easy.
I got one, baby. I'm a one and doneer.
So that they have that. And, some people, they 35 years in without a single blemish on their record, like nothing.
That's so hard to do.
Getting pushed out because they're told that they're, not fit for service anymore.
Because we wouldn't get an experimental
because
vaccine.
They said, it's against my religion, or I have a medical reason. That's that the mental anguish, the moral injury to these people is incalculable. And the people that didn't join the lawsuit, have there been suicides over this? Yes. Yes.
Do you have a number?
A
rough estimate of
estimate, just within the 458, we've lost 2. But we created a really close group. We're able to really, anybody showing signs of stress, I would call my senior veterans. These are the guys you're talking about, and send them, because they're across the country, and I'd say, go and check on this person.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like, from my perspective, you were able to create a network and system that Veterans Affairs, even after all of their funding, all of their tools, all of their resources, all of their people, could not be bothered to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other part of it was trust, because veterans
Yes.
don't trust Veterans Affairs because they keep getting screwed over by Veterans Affairs. And
Yes.
their trust in the chain of command was completely demolished by all of what they were seeing happen.
They were
So,
supposed to protect us and stand
yeah,
up for us.
well, that's your job as a CO, is it not?
That's
How
what
are
I
you going
thought
to
it
ask
was.
these people to do what you want them to do
Right.
if you've broken that covenant that says, I will look after you first? My
Right.
career is number two. My people are number one.
Right. How are
You
you
know?
supposed to ask them to go run into a burning building or go pull somebody out in a firefight where you know they're probably going to get shot?
Yeah.
Nobody is ever going to follow. What is that
No.
saying? I will never ask you to do something that I would not do myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So General Vance was CDS when the COVID vaccine first emerged.
Right.
He was told to mandate it, and he said no. He said, my people are not to be experimented on. And
Right.
if there's something wrong with it, you're taking out my entire military, because they were only using Moderna.
Oh,
at a
that's not
time
planned.
at a time when Moderna was being pulled by the Danes for use in young men. So he said no.
Right.
What happened to his career, Kelsey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they bring in Admiral MacDonald.
Told
Admiral
the party
MacDonald.
line.
Yeah, I had the briefing note to Admiral MacDonald on
Ooh.
mandate of vaccine.
What does that say?
Can't do it. Don't do it. You cannot do it. And he said, pound salt. I'm not doing it. What happened to his career, Kelsey?
Gone.
Yeah. So Eric gets in the chair as acting CDS, and he gets a briefing note, pretty much the same one that MacDonald got. You cannot do this. That briefing note was written by Trevor Cadieux. What happened to his career, Kelsey? General Fortin, in charge of the public rollout of the vaccine.
Right.
You can't do a mandate.
Right.
What happened to his career?
Yeah.
General Whalen said, what you're doing right now to the CAF between the mandate and the DEI, I'm head of HR. I don't have people. This doesn't work. What happened to
Right.
his career?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So as much as there's problems with sexual allegations and actual sexual attacks in the armed forces, they're also using it as a political weapon, which then
Of course.
diminishes the effect of it.
Right.
Because you see these generals and, oh, well, he got off because he's a general. No, actually, he got off because he was innocent, and it was a
Right.
political way of getting him out of the chair.
Right. But we had I actually did a TED Talk this time last year. And there was a retired member who also spoke on behalf of the charity. Great, very kind man, in all kind, like very kind man. But he forced the mandates.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out he was also speaking alongside of me, I asked that he does not shake my hand in public. And
Mm-hmm.
I was chastised for that. And I said, that's not, I don't care. And right before we actually went and did the TED Talk, I pulled him into a hallway and said, I just want you to know, whether you ever sit with this or not, people have killed themselves over the decision you made.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say you were just doing your job, and I'm always going to respond to you, so were the Nazis. And I'm going to sleep at night. And as kind and soft spoken as you are now, your decisions are ones you will have to live with.
Right.
Not ones. And he said, well, can you prove that? And I said, yes. If you want me to call up the widows, we can do that.
Yeah.
Very kind man.
And
But
wait till you get into the vaccine injury stories. They're trying to, first of all, I've got it. There was a conversation within Veterans Affairs that said they will not cover vaccine injury. It's not service related. So they knew going into this that if there were vaccine injuries, they will not cover members of the military for it. Oh, they need to apply to the VISIT program. But they didn't tell them And not only that, but if you're military, you can't access civilian programs.
That's right.
Yeah. Funny, I know this. And people were told when they said, what if there's something wrong? What if I get injured by this?
Right.
They were assured, don't worry, VAC will take care of you.
Who said that?
So I've got RSM saying it. I've got COs saying it.
Oh my God.
And there was
we really
never,
can burn this thing to the ground.
They never ever intended to cover vaccine injury. So we've got injured veterans. I have one in particular who's the military doctor was willing to say this is a vaccine injury from Moderna.
Right.
And VAC has said, we're not covering you. He's now been released on a medical release because he's that badly injured. He has nothing. He wasn't in long enough to get a pension. Veterans Affairs won't cover him. He's a young guy with a family. And he said, I was told I would be looked after if something happened to me. So
would he talk?
Oh, yeah.
Publicly?
Yeah.
Will he talk to me?
Yeah. He's very public about it.
I need to have a chat with him.
Yeah. I was stunned when he told me that they had turned him down, when a military doctor especially had agreed to diagnose him. That's rare. That's very rare.
Does he have repercussion at all?
No, he's now out on his 3B. But so in my lawsuit, one son's plaintiff is a military doctor.
Mm-hmm. So
she was told not to report injuries as vaccine injured.
Does she have that in writing?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't say anything, Kelsey, without proof. So yeah, she was told not to report vaccine injury or to write it up as something else. And she went to them and she said, this is a vaccine injury, I need to report it. And they're like, no. So
what was she told to write it?
Figure out something else.
Just anything else. Just cannot state
allergies,
injury.
Whatever.
Allergies. Myocarditis allergies, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And in our unofficial count, we've got about 26 deaths, which in a military our size is significant. There's a higher incidence of death in our Canadian military than there was in the general population, if you go by percent.
Percent, yeah.
Yeah. And the vaccine injuries have ranged from everything from a rash right through to death.
Oh,
and here's the other thing. They won't let me have their medical records.
How? How can they keep those from you?
Well, for the people who have died, they're saying for the confidentiality of the deceased person.
What about the family?
They're denying the family.
Oh, so they're doing what Fraser Healthcare and Island Healthcare is doing to people like Alicia Duncan, where they hide their medical records, even though that's illegal.
Yeah.
Awesome, government. High five, Canada. You keep winning.
Yeah. Exactly. So,
wow.
Because, I need those records in order to have my own experts take a look at it.
We need someone to leak those records is what we need.
Yeah.
I feel like we can find a guy.
There is supposed to be an exemption for those records if you need them for litigation. And so I've written on my letterhead, said I'm a lawyer. I've been retained by the family.
Right.
I need those records for litigation purposes. Nope, not giving them to you. So we need to go into court and see if we can if I can get a justice to agree to let me have medical records, because I've got perfectly healthy men between 35 and 40, especially.
Right.
Their wives waking up to them dead in the bed beside them.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we hearing about this? Why am I not hearing about this? Because I feel like I'd be hearing about this.
Yeah, he was Patricia, and his wife woke up next to him cold in the bed. He had bench pressed 600 pounds just a couple days before.
Oh my God, the trauma of that alone.
Oh, and get this. Here's a good example of abuse. The NCIS shows up, and CFNIS shows up, and they, first of all, tried to accuse her of killing him.
Excuse you?
Yeah, summertime. She's sitting there in very skimpy clothing she was sleeping in the kitchen in the PMQ. He's dead upstairs, and they're not. They're treating her. She said they were basically accusing her of killing him. And eventually she's like, can I have blanket or can I have clothes?
Yes.
And they're like, no, you're a suspect. And
Excuse you?
she's like, what? Yeah.
I'm a.
And
Oh
so
my god.
eventually, when they let her go up there, he's laying there naked on the floor with medical equipment around him.
And they let her
And
see that.
she had to climb over him to get the clothes. They didn't even pull a sheet off the bed to cover him. And then when they went to remove his body, thankfully there were other Patricias had come, of course,
Yes.
because word gets out quickly. They were bumping him down the stairs.
Excuse me?
And his fellow Patricias pushed them out of the way and carried him out properly.
Who are these people?
And the widow came to me for help. And I, at one point, my receptionist was like, why is their waiting room full of men in uniforms? Because I made them come here, the CO, the RSM.
Yeah.
I made them come and apologize to that widow personally in my office.
Good for you.
It was like, God damn, you treated her awful, like terribly. No widow deserves that.
No one deserves that, period.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
you and I could
there's
go
lots going
9
on.
hours. Yeah, I mean, we're goddamn. I have one more question before I want to go from this first episode, and then I think I've basically got you scheduled, like I said, for at least 6 more. So obviously you're time dependent, but legitimately there's a lot that needs to be. We haven't even scratched the surface here. This is just a good intro for everyone who doesn't know you on this side of things. And basically the level of destruction you are about to be for this government is so brilliant and something I'm so aligned with, and somebody I'm so beyond grateful to not only have your time but your willingness to do this, and even to just associate. You're the people I associate with for a reason. So can you tell me how you're handling this?
Some days are tougher than others.
Okay.
Some days it's I won't call it anger, I'll call it rage. That people who put on the uniform are being treated this way, that this is their life, and it's not, should not be their life.
Right.
Some days are absolutely heartbreaking. When I get calls from people that have had experiences that no one should have to have gone through. Or, when I get a call from or an email from a family member to tell you that one of my clients has committed suicide, or I get a call from a client who's considering MAID because he's been offered MAID by
Oh, that's our next episode.
Yeah. But I have a fantastic team of people around me, and they're veterans, so I don't need to explain why I'm having the it's and from my previous nursing career, I was talking to a veteran with lots of years of experience, including combat deployments into Afghanistan. And I was telling him some of my past stories with my nursing career, etc. And he looked at me and said, "You have PTSD." And I looked at him and said, "No, I don't."
Okay.
And he's like, "Yes, you do."
Welcome to the club.
And I was like this light bulb kind of went on. I'm like, oh, okay. So we've changed it to the days where I not coping as well. We call them veteran days.
Oh, I love
in
that.
my office. I'm having a veteran day. Okay.
No more words need to be said.
Yeah, that's where my staff brings me extra cups of tea that day.
Yes, little self-care.
Screens of phone calls, that kind of thing. But generally, resilience. Just feeling like, okay, how can I solve the problem? Can I do anything about it? And if there's nothing I can do about it, let it go. Yeah. And I asked my client when I appeared before the National Citizens Inquiry, because I wanted the voice of military members and veterans to be put in, and they can't touch me because I'm not in the chain of command.
That's right.
So I can say what needs to be said. So I wanted their voices heard. And that was a really good experience. I finished it, standing ovation at the end. from people. I had colonels come up to me afterwards, retired colonels, and say, "You nailed it." And I asked them, I said, my clients, I said, "How would you fix this? Because I don't want to go in here, complaint,
Right.
complaint, 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 complaint. How would you fix it? Because I'm a problem solver. So, like,
Yeah.
you tell me, you're the ones with all the experience, what would fix it?" And the number one recommendation was an inspector general.
Okay.
Get rid of the ombudsman because they're useless. Inspector general who has the authority to move outside of the chain of command, and everything goes to the inspector general. So you're not getting grievances
Right.
hidden, put
Right.
in a drawer until, oh, you've been released. You can't file a grievance,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So there's that. And yeah, that's their solution, is hold the chief of defense staff accountable.
Yeah. Well, they need to
Because
be.
his commander in chief is the governor general or the king.
That's right. That's a real reality.
That's the reality. And that's why they feel untouchable. And
Well,
if
for
we
now.
had someone, I think that if they had an inspector general who actually was willing to doesn't care what their social media profile gets hit with, but actually holds them to account, I think that would be the answer. At least part of the answer anyway, but that comes from my
right
clients.
from them. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what I'm excited, because these people are action oriented. We don't need to complain. We need to complain for a second. You need to hear our voices, and then we need to get down to work.
Yeah.
And that is something we're seeing. I know this will come out before that, but the government is being forced to do its first research study on veteran suicide. And I'm going to testify in February on that as well.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest things we can do is not just sit there and complain. We can definitely give them the shit kicking they deserve for the first half of the meeting. And then the second half needs to be, I understand you don't know how to move and be action oriented. So let me show you how to do your job.
Right.
And then I'll give you the roadmap. All you have to do is start walking.
Mhm.
So I think that's where things need to change and shift. And it goes without saying, I'm deeply grateful, not only from me, but I also know people you have worked with and continue to work with, and you have also helped me personally. And even if you never helped me personally, I know stories of you through other of my friends. And I will tell you that you have helped give people hope. And with hope, we can heal and we can change and we can work through things like sanctuary trauma and what this government and this system has done to our veterans and our continuing serving individuals. So it goes without saying that you are one of the most treasured Canadians I think that we have. And I really hope that tall poppy syndrome doesn't end up kicking your ass out of the country. But if it does, I'll follow you anywhere, because you are somebody I would be honored to have to the left, the right, and right behind me. So
Thank you.
With that, how can people help support Valour Law and also the charitable arm of yours that does this work, so that the VLAC, the nonprofit that you have, can help these veterans as well?
Yes. So if people go to valourlegalactioncentre.org, they can donate to help pay for some of these cases, because these big cases, I don't charge legal fees for it. Those are pro bono from me. So that helps pay for. We looked at printing our evidence to give it to the Crown, and it was $260,000
That's
just to
insane.
print it. So that's what we do the fundraising for,
Right.
is to help cover those type of expenses. And when I named my law firm and named the nonprofit, I chose Valor because I found a quote from Roman times. It was, "In valor there is hope." And so for you to say that I offer people hope, that's exactly what I decided to do when I finished law school, articled with a retired light colonel, and hung my own shingle, which they don't like you to do. They want you to go and be
That's
programmed
right.
with a big firm, but I wanted to represent military, and
Yeah.
nobody was representing military except some retired JAG officers.
Right.
So yeah, and I was setting up my first office and had 10 people already as clients with no advertising. So from there, yeah, I do what I do because I care about what happens to these people. And if I've got a skill set they can use, so here I am.
Yeah, you are the definition of the best person to have in the foxhole, and it shows. And again, I'm very grateful for your time and everyone else. We're going to make sure to put everything in the show notes. But this, like I said, we're going to be doing a series with her over time. On the Kelsey Sharon perspective, and we're going to continue updating you on what's going on in the CAF, what's going on with Maid, what's going on from her perspective, whether it's medical because of her background or whether it's legal. But this will be a continuum. You guys can go find everything in the show notes. Please go donate. Like I said, if you're going to go to Starbucks and buy a shitty coffee for $6, the least you can do is take that one coffee and go donate it, because it is going to go to somebody and it will change their lives. And I hate to break it to you, but these cases and knowing that there's hope is sometimes what keeps people alive to the next season, the next minute, the next day, the next hour. And those people have family members. So it does make a difference whether you see it or not. I'm promising you it does. So you stick with me, my love, and everybody else, we will see you all next week.